And so, to explain how we got here, because I do think it's important. This is the first episode of a new show. To bring people up to speed, I think it's important that I explain how we got to this point. So let me come back here. Bing. It was the end. So for people who don't know my story, about 4.5 years ago, I went through like a quote unquote red pill experience where I was a Democrat for 20 years and I basically woke up to how much my party had lied to me and how much like just bullshit that I believed was true that was not true. And I think a lot of people have gone through this story, and for some reason I ended up going viral on the internet for this story. I wrote an article about being a Democrat that went to a Trump rally right before the New Hampshire primary in 2020. It went really, really viral on the internet, got millions of views. I was on all these shows, and I thought that that was my red pill experience, right? Because that's what I was told. I was never involved in any of this stuff. I was a normal person, well, relatively speaking. I had a normal life, all that stuff. And then I got thrown into this world. And I thought I'd had my red pill experience when I woke up and I discovered that the Democratic Party was basically bullshit, right? And so that was a little bit of a that was a little bit of a ride. That was a wild ride, as it were. And I basically, there are so many okay. There are so many people on the internet who claim to be from the left, who claim to be the person who left the left because they saw the light and they realized that Donald Trump is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And so many of those people are fake. So many of those people are grifting. It's an opportunity to make a lot of money, and God knows I did make some money. I didn't make as much as a lot of people because I didn't play their game. But there's an opportunity to make a lot of money. There's an opportunity to build a brand. There's an opportunity. I got a lot of followers really quickly. I got over 100,000 followers on YouTube in like less than a year. There are a lot of fake people that say that they have this type of experience that don't really have it. Or if they do have it, it's kind of like they get enticed by all of the perks that come with being someone that left the left, and you get embraced and you get love bombed and you get all this stuff. And the reason I say this is that I understand there are a lot of fake people that claim that story. My story was actually real, though. Mine really was real. And I told myself when I started doing this kind of like internet content thing, which I don't know if I actually would have done had it not started basically at the beginning of the pandemic and like all my work got canceled because I was a keynote speaker, I did corporate training, stuff like that. So that was like all in-person stuff, it all get canceled. And so I needed something to do, and all of a sudden I had this YouTube channel that was growing really quick, and I made a whole bunch of money doing that, and that worked out pretty great. But I said to myself, like when I decided, I was like, okay, you're gonna go try to do this internet content thing. All right. Your number one job is to portray an authentic human experience. That was my commitment I made to myself. Like, if you're going to do this internet content thing, you're not going to lie. You're not going to front. You're not going to be someone that you're not. You're not going to put on the brand. And God knows I had all these people who were like, the brand, Carl, an image and the brand. I was like, fuck you. Just not my deal. And I said, if you're going to do this, your job is to speak to normal people and and present an authentic human experience. And when you get a lot of followers on the internet, that actually becomes a lot more difficult than you might think. Because I was thrown into this political world where they were perfectly fine with me questioning the left and waking up from the left and realizing the Democrats were full of shit, right? They were fine with that. But because my story was real, I kept asking questions and I kept taking in new information because that was just what I did. Like, listen, for the bulk of my adult life, I was simply not focused on the political world. I was not focused on any of this. I was focused on doing my PhD and being a career person and building a business. And I was focused on, and when I focus on something, I do it really well, but it's to the detriment of everything else. So once my focus changed, I started looking at like what's going on in the world. That's when I really zeroed in on like, okay, like what is the truth? What is the real truth? And when you wake up and you become kind of like the poster girl for, and I was the poster girl for like a full year of like the Democrat that left the Democrats to go to the Trump rally or whatever the fuck. When you keep asking questions, they don't like that. And I kept asking questions and I kept not following the approved talking points. And believe me when I tell you, they know you are made well aware of what the approved talking points are that you're allowed to follow, and you know what you're supposed to say and what you're not supposed to say. And I just didn't care because, like I said, I told myself the one commitment I made is if you're going to do this internet content thing, you are going to present an authentic human experience, and that's going to be the way it goes. And you are not going to deviate from that for any reason. And so I didn't. And here we are. So after Biden got into office, I kept kind of asking questions. And I kept engaging in inconvenient conversations online. Now, something happened in June of 2021 that was very inconvenient for my red pill process. I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I've been canceled many times by people on the internet. I'm very experienced at it now. In June of 2021, I was not experienced at it. So what happened is I made this video that said CRT is not anti-white. Because I had become one of the leading voices on critical race theory. I was lobbying for critical race theory bills. I was teaching people about it. I've been talking about critical race theory since 2020. I've been breaking news about critical race theory since 2020. I broke the Coke Be Less White story in February 2021. That to this day remains one of the biggest kind of like anti-CRT stories of all time. I did that on my own. And so so I made this video that said CRT is not anti-white, which by the way is still correct. People are going to try to argue with me on that, but it is still actually correct, and we can talk about that another time if you want. I experienced the worst mobbing and cancellation of my life from the dissident right because of that video. I was harassed to an absolutely ridiculous extent by the dissident right. They attacked my channel for weeks. They got thousands of people to unsubscribe from my work because I expressed that opinion. They stalked me to every single live interview I was doing and took over the chat and just were like smearing me and defaming me. They posted my address all over the internet. And listen, there were groypers involved in that, but the groypers were not the main groups doing it. I know the main because and the reason is Vince James was one of the people that was leading the attacks on me for no good reason. I will not forgive him for that, by the way. Like, he owes me a fucking apology. And all the shit he's talked about me since, he owes me a fucking apology. I'll tell you what. There was also this guy named Joe No White Guilt, Jason Kana. A lot of his people were doing it. There were groypers involved. I mentioned them specifically because I'm friendly with them now, but I wasn't back then. I didn't like Nick back then. I think that he did not like me either. We've come around on that. The reason I bring this up, though, is not to really drag anyone, and I don't want to go that far into it, other than to say that I was called, like, one of the reasons Vince James attacked me, he's like, that bitch is a plant. That fat bitch is a plant. I wasn't a plant. I was a real person having an experience and stating an opinion that is actually backed up with facts when people want to take the time to look at it. And the worst mobbing and cancellation of my life came from the dissident right. I still think about to this day, how much quicker would this process of me red pilling on World War II related stuff, how much quicker would that process have gone had that not happened? Because the thing is once I was attacked and lied about by the dissident right, and this went on literally for months. It went on from June of 2021 through I think September of that year. So it went on for several months. If I hadn't been attacked so badly by the dissident right, would I have come to this conclusion earlier? Now, none of that is the fault of the people that I'm interacting with today. So I'm not trying to place blame on anyone. I'm just saying, like, that was definitely like a part of like why I was probably resistant to these ideas for so long, because I had had so many dissident right-wingers lie about me, like, post shit all over the internet. They made all these memes about me. They called me every which name. They doxed my address all over the internet just because I made a video they didn't like. So I was pretty closed off to these ideas for a while. Then in December of 2021, I I was pretty depressed at this point. I actually hate being on the internet, true story. I was pretty depressed at this point with being on the internet. I've since come to terms with it. But basically I had this moment in December of 2021 where I was being an uppity bitch on Twitter. I know that's shocking information for people that I was being an uppity bitch on Twitter, but I was. And so I was in this spiritual dialogue with a whole bunch of Christians on Twitter, and I was kind of trolling them. And my thought process was, I'm going to speak as overtly about my beliefs as Christians do about their beliefs, and we're just going to see how they like it. Because I was being proselytized to so much, it drove me nuts. So I was like, okay, Christians, I'm going to give you a little bit of your own medicine. I'm just going to talk about my spiritual beliefs. I'm not an atheist, by the way. I'm going to talk about my beliefs as overtly as you talk about yours, and we're going to see how this goes. Well, it didn't go well. And during about a 2-hour back and forth exchange, I sent out a tweet that said something to the effect of, so the conversation was, do we have a moral obligation to prevent abortion? My position is, and people might not like this, but this is my position. I think that when I think if a child is meant to be born, that child will be born. And I think there might be reasons that a woman might become pregnant and that child might not be born, that from a spiritual perspective, from like a higher vantage point, that might that might need to occur in that person's life for them to learn something or to, I don't know, become a different person before that child's ready to be born. I think that when parents lose children due to miscarriages or things like that, oftentimes the soul of that child will come back as future children. This is my spiritual beliefs. And you don't have to agree with it. I'm just explaining. So, do we have a moral obligation? I believe that people are born that are meant to be born. I believe that people don't die until they're meant to die. Like, I believe this is, it's not entirely like, oh, what do they call it? I forget. It's not entirely predestination because, like, I believe we have free will as well, but that's what I believe. And so do I have a moral obligation to do that? Well, no. I'm not a fatalist, fluffy cow respecter, no. Because I believe if someone's meant to be born, they'll be born, and if someone's meant to die, they'll die, and that's just the way I see things. So my answer to them when I was being uppity was, no, I don't think we have a moral obligation for reason X, Y, B, and Z. And then I said, I said something to the effect of like, people choose their experience in this lifetime. They choose, some people might choose to go through hardship. Some people might choose to experience losing a child for whatever reason. We don't know what spiritual path they're on. That's not our choice to make. Everyone is on a different spiritual path. And sometimes we have the most spiritual growth when we go through the dark nights of the soul, when we go through the hardest times. The hardest times leads to the most personal growth. Sucks to go through though. But that doesn't mean there's not a reason for it. Doesn't mean there's not an outcome of it that leaves us in a better, stronger place than we were before. So in the course of having this conversation, I tweeted something to the effect of, Hitler went to heaven and there might be a spiritual reason why all these people chose to die in the Holocaust. Perhaps not my best wording of all time, but my point was the Holocaust was like a mass event. I think that on a spiritual level, a lot of people in spirit agreed to be a part of that event for some bigger picture reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's balancing energy. Maybe it's that there was some sort of spiritual growth that they all needed to experience. But that's what I believe. And people can, again, no one has to agree with me. And in regards to saying Hitler went to heaven, I don't believe hell exists. No one can go there. I believe everyone goes to heaven. I believe we all go to the same place. I believe God loves everyone unconditionally, regardless of what we do in this lifetime. And so my point was not, when I said that Hitler is a good person. My point was actually that I thought Hitler at that point was like evil. I thought I agree. I completely did not deviate from the traditional narrative. Plenty of Heart says, if you bring this dumb shit to Nick and Groypers, they'll pin your ears back. They will fuck you up. I don't think they will because they're well aware of it. I don't think they will. So my point when I said that was not, I literally never once in my life questioned the Holocaust. Never once questioned it. I never once questioned what I had been taught in school. I never questioned anything about World War II at all. I never thought that Hitler was anything other than evil. I really didn't. But when I sent out that tweet, let me tell you what, that was like having a fucking bomb dropped on my life. It went viral like nothing had ever gone viral before in my experience. And I didn't expect this. And I was kind of making fun of it at the time because I was like, this is like my thought at the time was, this is so fucking stupid. But I was attacked as an anti Semite all over the place. I had a hit piece written about me in Newsweek. I still to this day have that tweet paraded around. I explained it like immediately. I said, I'm not saying, I literally explained it over and over. And I'm not saying Hitler is a good person. I'm not saying the World War II didn't happen. I'm not questioning any of that. I'm saying hell doesn't exist. And so no one can go there. So what the fuck do you want? Where do you want him to go? Walmart? I don't believe hell exists. And that should have been enough of an explanation if people were being reasonable. And that probably should have been my wake-up call, that there was more to this whole thing than I had any idea about. I had just kicked a massive hornet's nest that I had no idea existed. And I didn't understand because I didn't care if people were Jewish. I didn't think anything about the Holocaust. I never questioned it. I wasn't on any sort of like, I hated the dissident right. I hated the dissident right for the trauma that they had put me through for goddamn months. And then all of a sudden I'm being called an anti-Semite all over the place and I'm being questioned and I have to prove my bona fides. I have to prove I really don't hate Jewish people because I was in a spiritual discussion where one tweet was taken out of context. I was canceled by PragerU over that. And by the way, working with PragerU was one of the worst decisions of my life, and I regret it so much that I can't even tell you. I was kind of over but I was kind of over PragerU at that point anyway. So that was another thing. I was like, that's not really a big a deal. Like, I don't really give a fuck. Like, I don't care. But just the 19 levels of hell that I was put through over that one tweet when I was like, I'm one of the only people I'm one of the only anti-leftists that does original investigative journalism on the internet. I've broken more stories about the left than anyone else on the internet. Like, I mean, really, this is actually real. Like truly, like if you think someone's broken more original research than me, give me their fucking name. Honestly, I want to talk to them. So I'm like, you assholes are really gonna, you never react this way to the important stories. But I send one tweet you don't like that you completely ripped out of context, where I'm not even saying anything about World War II and Hitler, not really, if you actually look at the context, and you're gonna cancel me, you're gonna fucking smear my reputation, you're gonna turn my life upside down over one fucking tweet, where the fuck have you been? That really should have been my main wake-up call. But remember, I hated the dissident right. I fucking hated the dissident right. So I wasn't going down that road yet because I wasn't in a position to hear it. Yeah, it was almost hysterical. It was almost hysterical. Yeah, it was a lot. And so that followed me around for years. It still follows me around to this day. It's much less now because it's been a long time since it happened. So fast forward a couple of years, and it's the end of what, 2023, and October 7th has happened. October 7th changed everything. When October 7th happened, I was listening quite a bit to Nick Fuentes, mostly because now I had always been following Nick just because I was afraid of him more than anything else. I was afraid of him. I was like, he's gonna fuck shit up. So I have to know what he's doing because he's gonna fuck shit up, right? So I was already following him and kind of paying attention to him. And then October 7th happened. And I was like, oh shit, Nick Fuentes is gonna be off the chain. Off the chain. Yeah, it's almost been a year. And so I started following his Apple account, I think, around to these Twitter spaces. And I even followed his Apple account. He followed me back. I was like, what the fuck's going on? Why is Nick Fuentes following me? And so I started listening to his Twitter spaces that he was doing on his banned Apple account. And I started kind of like watching his show after October 7th. And wouldn't you know it, but Nick Fuentes was the voice of reason. Nick Fuentes was calm. He was not being evil. He was not calling for the eradication of Israel. And I was like, holy shit. In the meantime, the right is losing their goddamn minds. All these people that I had interacted with in 2020, like Dave Rubin, like Glenn Beck, like the entire Daily Wire staff, and Douglas Murray, everyone was losing their minds. Everyone immediately went hardcore pro-Israel. It didn't seem to matter to them at all that the Palestinians were being like just slaughtered. It was like I was like, I'm watching a genocide right before my eyes, and no one seems to care. And not only does no one seem to care, but everyone is cheering on the people perpetrating it. Because again, like I had no special affinity towards anyone. I never thought about like I had literally never considered that all the stuff around the Jewish question, as it were, I had never even considered it. I was like, I don't. My first reaction to what was going on with Israel and Palestine is like, I don't care. I care about America. Like, I don't give a fuck. And I started seeing all these people act crazy, and Nick Fuentes is the voice of reason, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And so then I start like bantering with Nick on Twitter just to like fuck around. I wasn't even thinking anything about it. And then I started getting connected with people in kind of like Nick's sphere with like Beardson and Wurzelroot and like Politically Provoked, and that didn't go well. That did not go well at first. But it's almost a good thing that it didn't go a good thing that it didn't go well, because when it didn't go well, I ended up meeting this one. Now, he and I might not be on the best of terms now, but he invited me on his show because he hates Nick and the Gripers. And hang on, I'm just putting something in the chat. I'm going to pin this. I'm going to pin this tweet in the chat. This is from a stream he did the other day. The reason I bring this up, and this is more for my audience than it is for the Groypers, although I think like everyone can like, you know, benefit from this. Hopefully that actually gets pinned to the chat at some point. Why aren't you pinning this? There we go. Message pinned on Rumble. The reason that I bring him up is that he reached out to me to come on his show, mostly probably because he wanted to harangue Nick and the Groypers and like use me to cause problems with them, and I understand that. But he and I started talking, and for some reason, and again, I'm pretty intuitive about this stuff. I oftentimes think that people meet each other for a reason. And for some reason I was like, why the fuck did I meet this guy? I was like, there's something this guy's supposed to do for me. I don't know what it is, but I had a very strong intuition. I was like, there's something this guy's supposed to do for me. And several months later, I said, will you just red pill me on the Jewish stuff? Because obviously, like after October 7th, a lot of things changed, and I was like, oh shit, there really is something to this, isn't there? There really is something to this. And I was like, okay, Carlin, you've gone down every other road, you've asked every other question. I've been watching the radical revolutionary far left for years at this point. No one seems to care if I watch the radical revolutionary far left, by the way. I watch them all the time. No one makes a fuss about that. But you start getting close to this Jewish thing, and all of a sudden, everyone freaks out. Did you gravitate to him because he's older? I mean, I definitely think him being older, is part of that. Part of it too was that I had watched a bunch of his videos to try to get a sense of, like, who is this guy? And I was left feeling like he was very thoughtful and empathetic with the people he was talking to. Now, I didn't understand at the time that the empathy only is reserved for men. It's not you don't get any empathy with him if you're a woman. You get a lot of empathy if you're a man, but like in watching his stuff, I was like, this is a person that I think understands things at a higher level. I thought he was very smart. I did like that he was older. Um, but I said to him, I was like, "Will you just red pill me?" And he's like, "No, I don't want to. Why don't you talk to these people?" And I was like, "I don't want to talk to those people. I want to talk to you." And so he didn't want to do it, and I kind of pushed him into it. And he tried at first, and I wasn't listening to him, and he basically gave up. He said, "We're not going to talk about this anymore." And I was like, "All right, well," I was like, "If it's meant to be, it'll like if it's meant to be, it'll be, whatever." And so then I think it was maybe even just a couple weeks later, he reaches out to me again, and he just starts sending me stuff. He starts sending me stuff. He's like, "Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this." Long story short, and the reason I bring this video up is that this is like a 20-minute clip that I just happened to see from his show. Someone DM'd me the other day and they were like, "Carlin, he talked about you on his show again." And I was like, "What the fuck?" And I scrubbed through like part of his stream, but his stream was like 18 hours long. And I was like, I'm not listening to all that shit. I don't really care anyway. So I didn't find the part where he talked about me, but I happened to land on this part where for 20 minutes, he is basically breaking down a really succinct explanation of the entire Jewish question. And this is the same stuff he taught me, and so I'm putting that in the chat for people who want to watch it. I specifically think my audience that isn't as tuned into this should probably watch it if you want to understand my perspective. We're not going to watch it on the stream. I just bring him up to say that he he was the one that really woke me up. And regardless of, I never want to be one of those people on the internet that just like hates people for no good reason, even though I do have reason to like have distaste in this particular circumstance. But like, the fact is that he did me a great service by waking me up and by showing me things in a thoughtful, pragmatic way, and sometimes beating me in the head with it, figuratively, of course, not literally. And and I really appreciated that. And then of course our whole relationship fell apart because I'm not, for reasons I'm not going to go into. And that made me really sad. That made me really sad because one of the last times I talked to him, and this is getting around to the reason we're doing this show, and we're going to get into it in a second, but it's my show and it's episode 1, so I'll do a preamble if I want. One of the last times I talked to him, before it all went to hell, was I had messaged him and I was like, "I'm having all sorts of feelings about all this stuff because," and I think probably a lot of people who are watching have maybe been through this. Um, and some people may be watching that haven't had this experience yet. But I messaged him. I was like, "I'm having all sorts of feelings about all this stuff because it really fucks with you when you start waking up." I thought I had taken the last red pill. I thought I was already there, and then I end up like going down this, the ultimate, well, I hope it's the ultimate kind of like, you have been lied to your entire life about everything. And it really fucks with you in a way that I cannot explain. And when you've been through it, you understand it. And if you haven't been through it yet, just like make sure that this is a rabbit hole you want to go down, because it really does fuck with you very badly. And so he messaged me when I was like, "Oh, you said you were having feelings about this situation." I said, I was just like, "I've had so many feelings right now." And he had asked me about them, and I was like, I was like, "I can't type all that out. Can we talk?" And he's like, "No, I can't talk right now. I gotta get up early in the morning." And I've always regretted not having that conversation. Like, that was something I was like, "Can we please have that fucking conversation?" Because, like, at the time, I was like, I was reeling and I had no one to talk to. I was reeling and I had no one to talk to. And, so one of the reasons I wanted to do this particular show is because I never got a chance to work out my feelings. I never got a chance to work out my feelings, and I feel like, you know, because that whole thing fell apart, right? And so I kind of view this process as a way of me working out my feelings. Me working out my feelings about the fact that I've been lied to my entire life about everything, the fact that you can't talk about this stuff. So, of course, I'm gonna talk about the thing you're not supposed to talk about, right? And I maybe will find other people that need to work out their feelings, and we can work out our feelings together. We can work out our feelings together about all the ways in which we've been lied to and all the bullshit. And I wanna do this in a way where, like, I think that a lot of people on the dissident right are toxic, like, really bad. I'm not saying everyone's toxic. I'm saying there are a lot of toxic people. Oh, it's too hot to have that hood on. I'm saying there are a lot of toxic people. And there are a lot and I understand why people get toxic because it's like, if you question this at all, they attack you, they smear you, they try to destroy your life, they try to do all this stuff. And so I can understand why people give into that hate and they give into that toxicity and they just look up at the world and they're like, there's no fucking point of any of this. Like, we're all lied to. It's all over. It's all, there's nothing we can do about it anyway, except just like, so why don't we just be hateful towards the people that we perceive have hate are like are destroying our world? And I'm just like, I want to bring a different perspective to this that yeah, are we gonna watch videos that people don't want us to watch on the internet? Yeah, sure, fine, but I don't hate anyone, and I'm not going to hate anyone, and I'm not I think we should be able to have this discussion in a more thoughtful and pragmatic way where it's about looking at evidence and questioning things, and like, for me, I am never going to judge someone based on whatever group they were born into. I know a lot of that's gonna make people mad, but that's just like that's just me. I don't agree with it. I don't like it. And I don't I don't want like I think the world is already toxic enough that I don't want to be a contributor to that anymore than, you know, than is necessary.